For those of you who know about the deadlift, know that it's one of the best exercises you could do in the gym. The deadlift incorporates almost every single muscle group to a degree. The deadlift is really great for developing lower body muscular power and lower body strength. What's up everyone, welcome to the video. Today the topic of the video is what is the best deadlift for improving your sprinting speed. For those of you who don't know, there is a bunch of variations of the deadlift. There is the trap bar deadlift, the sumo deadlift, the conventional deadlift, the RDL, the stiff-legged deadlift, and it's kind of confusing which one is the most optimal for you to improve your sprinting speed. My goal for this video is to break that down as best I can so you can decide which one you can use in your training. But before I get into it, I just want to say that the deadlift is a great exercise. However, I don't think it's the number one thing you should be doing in order to get faster. The number one thing you should be doing to get faster is more sprinting, or otherwise work that is more specific to your goal. However, if you've put in a lot of sprint work in your off season or in your years of training, then the weight room obviously is the next step for you. Also, please note that depending on the athlete, the best deadlift or the most optimal deadlift is gonna vary for you because we're all different. We all have different limb lengths, body weights, body heights, individual differences have you. And in this case, there is no one size fits all deadlift for you to ultimately improve your speed. Obviously, if there was, we'd be doing the same one. We'd all be running 4.4s. So I just wanted to put that out there before I get into this video. So the first deadlift I want to talk about is the sumo deadlift. In most cases, the sumo deadlift will probably allow you to lift the most amount of weight. This is good because more mechanical tension typically means more volume over time, and that results in more strength and hypertrophy gains, which is what we want. However, I don't think that the sumo deadlift is as optimal as a conventional or a trap bar deadlift. And this is because the shin angle that gets created when you do a sumo deadlift. When you pull sumo opposed to conventional, your shin angle is fairly vertical and your torso is upright. Now in most sports, you don't typically see an athlete accelerating with a vertical shin angle. It just doesn't really happen. So if you're trying to improve your acceleration, I would probably start with a trap bar deadlift or a conventional deadlift because of the more positive shin angle that those movements create. If you're creating these positive shin angles while you're performing the movement, you're going to be able to create force in that specific setting. So that's why I say that. Also, the sumo deadlift puts you in a more upright position. So if you're somebody that has a back injury, then it might be more likely that you'll be able to train the sumo deadlift with a little bit less pain. Obviously, this depends because there's a million things that could be causing your back pain, but the sumo deadlift for the most part is generally the most safe for your spine. And that's another reason why a lot of powerlifters do it, because a lot of powerlifters typically are low bar squatting, and that puts you in a very lean forward position. So you're using a lot of your spinal erectors in that movement. So in this way, it takes some of the loading off your spine than you would be doing a conventional deadlift where you're basically lean just as far forward to start. As for the involvement of certain muscles or muscle activation goes, the sumo deadlift requires a little bit more hip and glute strength, and the conventional or any deadlift you see that has you in that forward position requires a little bit more low back and hamstring strength. So that is just kind of one thing that I want to differentiate for you, but it really in the long run doesn't make a huge difference because you still train all of the same muscles just to a different degree by doing both movements. So I'll put the two on the screen if you want to compare the shin angles for yourself. The sumo deadlift definitely has more vertical shin angles, but obviously it's going to vary for each athlete, whereas what position you could get in the start of the sumo deadlift and how upright you're really going to be. So this is, like I said, there's individual differences for all of us, so we just need to kind of use trial and error at first to see which one works best for us. As for the conventional deadlift, it puts you in a more sport-specific type of range of motion with your shin angles and how you're creating force. However, the one problem that I find is for a lot of athletes, the bar really gets in the way of this. And when you start to pull, your shins start to go more vertical, and this kind of stinks because then you're kind of defeating the purpose. So for a lot of people, the bar really just gets in the way. And this is why I would say that the trap bar is probably more effective for you to use in this case from a sport specific standpoint. If you're really trying to train your acceleration and how much force you can get into the ground, then I would probably suggest the trap bar deadlift for you. Also, conventional pulling and the trap bar deadlift are also easier variations, in my opinion, to learn. So from a learning standpoint and a learning curve standpoint, I think that I would probably, if you're a bare bones beginner, I think that those movements are great for you to start in order to learn how to hip hinge effectively and get your feet wet in terms of deadlifting in general. But I've also seen tons of cases where the sumo just seems more natural to people. Also, in the case of the conventional deadlift, it does allow you to use a greater range of motion than the sumo or the trap bar. When you do a sumo deadlift, you're widening out your stance, and this is bringing yourself closer to the bar, which reduces your range of motion. In the trap bar deadlift, although you aren't widening your stance, the handles on the trap bar are actually sticking up a little bit higher than the ankle or higher than the bar would be lying when you're doing a conventional deadlift. So if you want a greater range of motion, increase the time under tension, I think maybe the conventional deadlift is one you want to try. Now, farther on that side of the spectrum is the Romanian deadlift and the stiff-legged deadlift. The Romanian deadlift is a really good variation for those of you who want to use a lot of weight and put a lot of emphasis on your posterior chain without taking off the time under tension. Now, when you see people do the Romanian deadlift, typically bodybuilders like doing the Romanian deadlift for this reason. It allows you to keep the tension on the muscle group that you're targeting. And unlike the stiff-legged deadlift, you don't really put the bar straight on the ground, which takes the tension off of the muscle group. So this is why bodybuilders choose the Romanian deadlift a lot of the time. The stiff-legged deadlift is also a good variation. However, it doesn't allow you to use as much weight as the Romanian deadlift, but it probably targets the hamstrings a little bit more specifically. So that's one that if you really are trying to train your hamstrings, I would suggest the stiff-legged deadlift. But coming back to the topic of the video, neither of those deadlifts are really specific in terms of shin angle, so it's going to be harder for you to develop power in those positions and transfer that to your sport play or sprinting. Lastly, at the very end of that part of the rabbit hole, you have the one leg variation Romanian or stiff-legged deadlifts. And in my opinion, I think these are really good. I think the one-legged stiff-legged deadlift is one for you to use as a supplement to maybe your normal deadlift, because what this can do is also help you prevent imbalances. Also, it has you focus on one leg at a time. And as we know, sprinting is a movement where you're only one leg is on the ground at a time. So this is a little bit more specific than those other two movements, probably, but you can't use nearly as much weight. So the mechanical tension is dramatically lower than you would be in a stiff-legged or a Romanian deadlift. In my opinion, this is a great movement you can use in your dynamic warm-up because it forces you to create more of a mind-muscle connection to your hamstrings and your glutes, and it forces you to use your stabilizers and fire those muscles that you typically normally don't pay attention to. So that's why a lot of people like to use it in their dynamic warm-up. So the last deadlift I want to touch on is the snatch grip or the wide grip deadlift, and this is a really interesting one for me because although it is harder for you to maintain your grip strength doing, you're going to be able to use a greater range of motion in very similar shin angles and forward lean as the conventional deadlift. So for those of you who are more interested in improving those aspects, and maybe you want to use straps when you do the snatch grip deadlift, but for those of you who really want to increase the range of motion, the snatch grip deadlift is a really awesome variation that I suggest you try if you're looking for that sort of thing. So you've waited for it. In my opinion, the most optimal deadlift for you to do is the trap bar deadlift. If you want to improve your sprinting speed, if you want to improve your vertical jump ability, the trap bar deadlift is the #1 deadlift I think you should try. And this is because the trap bar deadlift creates very specific shin angles, allows you to use a lot of weight, and also is a very easy to learn movement. And in my opinion, that is one of the #1 things that athletes really need, is a movement that doesn't require a huge learning curve. If you're a new athlete, if you're in high school, the trap bar deadlift is probably going to be very easy for you to just learn right on the fly, and really improving your acceleration and the amount of force you could put in the ground when you're driving to accelerate in your sport. So if I were to rank my top 3, I would go trap bar deadlift #1, conventional deadlift #2, #3 sumo, and then after that, the list is kind of up to you because it gets to the point where there's individual differences for all of us, and some of the other variations can be used to supplement our main deadlift movement. So that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them down in the comments below. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.